Okay, so I'm standing now here with Märta Rydbeck from Switch Media, who is attending Streaming Tech Sweden today. What do you think about the show?
I think it's really top class. I mean, it challenges me in terms of my knowledge of technology. I think particularly the last one, the Will Law's talk from Akamai was so interesting because I always thought that everything was settled in terms of like HLS and Dash and that our internal developers were just messing around and why aren't they just fixing this? But I understand now that, well, there is a lot to be fixed and it's not dependent on our developers really internally. It's more of a business and industry factor that's playing here. And I'm always sort of amazed at this fact that there can never be a common protocol. Like, I mean, it's been like this for the 25 years I've been in this industry, has always been competing on technology. And I want to keep my own technology to me, but, you know, the end users who's going to pay for the services doesn't give it all, you know, doesn't really buy into that. No. They're only interested in content, really.
And I think that streaming industry has been, I mean, it got off to a rough start. Things didn't work perfectly, and it's been considered quite immature for some while. And things started to level out, and it become more sort of stable and starting to sort of, as you say, align to one or two protocols and that can share the technology. But then this happens, and then we're back to square one a little bit again. It feels like so.
Yeah, and I also think that, I mean, listening to Pontus Hellgren from Discovery was extremely interesting, and the questions afterwards when we were discussing is the fact that that is also competing on technology because he's building his own world, and you had this guy coming from Tele2 who was like asking, why are you building your own world when you could buy somebody else's platform and so on, and then he said, then I asked him, you know, what about BAMTech? And so he told so the idea was originally that they were going to buy a technology, but then it turned out that BAMTech was not possible because ownership changes and, you know, you're stuck with somebody, you're waiting in line for that platform's development. So it's such a complex world, but sometimes I just wish that everybody would just go on a common platform and then all the production companies would have something to do.
And we saw in the beginning of the day, we saw one talk from Filmlands, who is a production company here in Sweden. And now in Disney and Apple launching their services, and we have Netflix, and they really raised the bar on sort of the quality of both picture and audio. What do you think will be sort of how will the Swedish local actors, whether you're on producer side or whether you're on the TV channel side or wherever you are, how do you think they will be affected?
One thing is sure, they will be affected somehow, but I still think there is a long way before these giants can compete and the granularity of the local level. I mean, yes, okay, Netflix is investing in local productions because they have to, and they are great, but I mean, people want such a diversity of content, so I think there's still room for the local players. However, in terms of sort of you talking about the stacking of the service stacking and how many subscription can you actually manage to have in one place. I think there was this really interesting article that, you know, if you've been in the cable world for a long time, I mean, people are desubscribing to cable and they're subscribing now to all these individual services, but actually the bill remains the same. So they're still paying for the same thing, but they're not getting all the linear channels. And I think there is some way to work around that. And I think what TV4 and Bonnier is doing with C More is interesting because they have the linear streaming services in their C More package. And I think where the local market can compete is by aggregating all that into one space, which was sort of the ideas, you know, it's been in the ideas for a long time actually. But they still have to agree on a local level to compete with the bigger ones.
I mean, it's not only these large streaming services with subscription service, but you have a lot of other smaller, more niche actors and all those, which also want to sort of get a bite from your wallet and all those things. Do you think there is a room for free services or ad-funded services, and how do you think the Swedish services are competitive in that area?
Well, I've always been an advocate of subscription services because of my background in the business, and I strongly believe that you have to pay for content. But having said that, with new technology and the fact that you can do server-side ad insertion, as an example, really opens up a whole new market where you can do targeted ads, you can actually charge more for the ads. And once you get that ecosystem in place, there is definitely more room for ad-based AVOD services. And probably that's maybe what the local channels have to do more, because that's where the brands are willing to pay. I don't think global ad-funded services are going to be so competitive. So the Netflix and the Apple TVs will, Apple Plus or Disney will stay subscription-based. But I think the local services will have to go, and the more niched, as you mentioned, will have to go AVOD more than subscription VOD.
Yeah, because I think what's interesting, if you look at from the sort of internet perspective or the web perspective, is that once it became very simple for anyone to create a website or a blog or whatever, there was suddenly room for a lot of advertisement. And at that time, you came to a situation where there were a larger supply than the demand, or the supplier or the publisher didn't know how to be in contact with those advertisers. So then we have all this real-time bidding area, and maybe that's something will happen for on the streaming side, where it will be easier to not do. You may not have to do as Pontus and this team does to build everything from scratch.
No, hopefully not. But I mean, going into the ad business, you still have the issue of the measurement and aligning measurements so that in linear broadcast, everybody's sort of clear on that. But there is still sort of, how do you compare a started stream with somebody who watched it linear, and how do you actually build that ecosystem so it's comparable, that you can compare apples with apples, excuse the pun, and pears with pears, So I think there is still a lot of work to do in this ecosystem, and it's extremely fragmented in the ad tech world still. So I think we're going to see some big consolidation going on there. And I think there's going to be room also for players who are not the Googles and not the RTLs in this world. So it's a question of time. And AWS as well, I think. Yes, if you're really small and you are starting up, yes, you have to go with the big ones. But if you're a big fish, maybe you want to look at other alternatives, that you don't invest everything in Google or similar companies.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for attending Streaming Tech Sweden this year.
Thank you, and it's brilliant. Come here next year.
Thank you.